What's up, everybody? This is your boy, Teran Rodriguez, bringing you another edition of Set Point. And this week is a very big week as it's the NVA playoffs. Yes, the NVA playoffs, not the NBA playoffs, the NVA playoffs. It's a 3-day event. It's basically happening on the weekend, and 8 teams are in the NVA playoffs, but only one shall be named the NBA champion. Also, we have some Pac-12 women's volleyball schedule releases as Stanford, UCLA, USC, and Oregon have released their schedules. Hopefully I'll be able to get to them all in this episode. If not, I'll have to maybe cut it and chop it up into next week. And then some recent news that just happened less than 10 minutes ago. The beach Olympic pools have been announced. Where are the U.S. going to be in terms of the beach Olympic pools? And then also we have some transfer news because obviously we can't have any volleyball show without some transfer news. All that and more here on Set Point. This is Teran Rodriguez bringing you another edition of Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And welcome all to another edition of Set Point. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful afternoon, Monday afternoon that is. And hopefully everyone here had a good 4th of July. I know I did. Just pretty much took it easy and just prepared for this show as we are on episode 98 of Set Point. They grow up so fast. And you can listen to this show on many platforms such as Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podcast Addict, TuneIn, the list goes on and on. So without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. But first, we have a word from our sponsor for this week. Our sponsor is the Southern California Warriors, a semi-pro football team. The world of semi-pro sports is unlike any other sports organization. Players pay to play in hopes of so many different outcomes, whether it's playing to get them to try out for professional teams, big-time colleges, or just playing to stay in shape. No matter what, all semi-pro players have one thing in common, and that's playing for the love of the game. The SoCal Warriors have been on a quest to earn titles and give players second chances since 2017. Whether you're in Southern California or anywhere in the world, give semi-pro sports a chance if you love your sport. You may get that second chance you have been waiting for as an athlete. And the ways to follow the Southern California Warriors is first and foremost on Twitter at SoCal Warriors, then on Instagram at Southern California_Warriors, and then on Facebook by going to the search bar and typing in Southern California Warriors. So those are ways you could follow our sponsor, the official sponsor of IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. And you can follow IE Sports Radio on Twitter and on Instagram at IE Sports Radio. And then just go to Facebook and then head to the search bar and type in the word IE Sports Radio. And then once you see them, just hit the follow button and like them and show your support. So thank you to Southern California Warriors once again. And without any further delay, let's get on into the volleyball action. So we obviously got to start with the NVA, as the NVA has just, they've had their bracket released, and it's an 8-team bracket. And then it's basically, like I said, it's a 3-day event where it's a champion will be crowned on Sunday. And then there's also going to be a third place matchup, which is cool. It shows that making the Final Four isn't anywhere near easy. So basically, the first batch of matches are going to be, and by the way, all of this is taking place at the Pierce Sports Center in San Bernardino. So basically, it's basically going to be where the Ontario Matadors play, which is kind of fair. I mean, Ontario is in the playoffs, but I guess they decided to go with a place that is a state that's like more open. I mean, California is mostly opened up, and they have had the least amount of COVID cases, and they've played at the Pierce Sports Center quite a bit. So let's get on to the quarterfinal matchup. So the first matchup is the Southern Exposure taking on the Chicago Untouchables. That's the first match, and that's going to be at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. So if I'm not mistaken, when it comes to Southern Exposure, I want to say they have beaten the Untouchables. I unfortunately did not get a chance to whatchamacallit, like write down their little the matchup, the regular season matchups, which is very much my bad. I really did not mean for that to happen, and I apologize. But I need to tell you all this, that Southern Exposure has been hot as of late. Southern Exposure has been really good. And Adam Karnick in the chat room, thank you for joining me, says, that name gets better every time I hear it. The Chicago Untouchables. Love it. I'm glad you like that nickname. By the way, Adam Karnick just completed his show, Chi-Town Weekly, which talks about all things Chicago sports and whatnot, and it's definitely do check that out. It comes on an hour before set point. It comes on at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Central time every Monday here on iSports Radio. And then 2 hours before set point goes live, we have Reppin' to NorCal Sports with Gina G that goes on at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Both are really good shows, by the way, and both are very listenable. So definitely tune in if you are a fan of Northern California sports or Chicago sports. So as for Southern Exposure, they have been hot as of recent, as they have won 5 in a row. I want to say it's like 5 or 6 in a row. Unfortunately, it doesn't say have their entire matches, which really sucks. Which, again, I'll try to pull up all their matches, but this whole website thing is kind of interesting to navigate, to say the least. But regardless, Southern Exposure, surprisingly, is the number 1 seed from their conference, which is quite nice. Like, Southern Exposure kind of started from the bottom, and now they're here. I don't mean to use a Drake reference. I'm sorry if y'all had to hear me use a Drake reference, but Southern Exposure has really grown quite a bit, and honestly, it's quite nice that they have. And looking, now that I have navigated through Southern Exposure's schedule through their team website, Southern Exposure actually lost to the Chicago Untouchables back on May 30th, where they lost 3-1. So that kind of comes into play a little. So if I'm Southern Exposure, I'm watching out for Chicago. And I think I'm just going to also start off by saying this. I think the playoffs are very much wide open to anyone. Like, even the worst team can maybe win the whole thing. So, and that's the unique thing about this whole tournament, because every team has had their ups and downs, like, at least one point of the season. Chicago kind of had their downs a few, I think it was like way back in whatchamacallit, in like the latter part of the season. Like, Chicago kind of got their bad losses out of the way starting off, whereas Southern Exposure kind of got off to a good start. Like, they started off 2-1, and then they went 1-2 in their second event, and then finished off strong with 3 5-set wins over some talented teams, with LA Blaze being the lone exception, except they kind of gave it their all. So Southern Exposure really came alive, and they also kind of got help from Team Freedom, which lost all their matches in the third and final event. And because Team Freedom lost all 3 of their matches in the final event, that opened the door for Southern Exposure to claim the conference. So Adam says, better to lose early than lose late. Facts. It's better to get the losses out of the way than lose when it truly matters. And that's basically exactly what Adam says. So I think this is going to be a very interesting matchup between Southern Exposure and the Untouchables. Like, do I think either team can definitely win that matchup, and it wouldn't shock me in the slightest. So for Southern Exposure, they went 6-3, which was indeed the best record in the national conference. And the Untouchables, on the other hand, went 3-6 in the American Conference. So, contrary to popular belief, it looks like Southern Exposure has the number 1 seed on their side of the bracket. It looks like this whole bracket is like upside down because Southern Exposure is 6-3, while in the American Conference the Ramblers are 7-2. So, in theory, Southern Exposure should be the 2 seed as opposed to the 1 seed, but maybe someone made a mistake with the bracket, but I think we don't care. So either way, Southern Exposure is basically the Southern Exposure did win their conference, as Marcus Los Great in the chat room says, losing is losing. Yep, that's true. And then Marcus says, second place just means first to lose. That's true. But Southern Exposure did get their, they did win their conference. They won the national conference, which they kind of got some help from, like I said, they got help from Team Freedom losing their last 3 games of the regular season. So now Southern Exposure is in a better position going forward. So basically, Southern Exposure will be taking on the Untouchables. Now, the Untouchables is kind of another interesting team. Like, they kind of got cold as the season went on, and unfortunately, they don't have their their schedule, which really sucks. But all I could tell you is that they did not have the best of luck when they did not have a great outing on the final event. They lost to the Tyrants in their second to last matchup. They lost to the Utah Stingers in 5 sets, which could have been a big win for them. And then the Untouchables also lost to the Orange County Stunners 3-1 in their first match of Event 3. So, again, the Untouchables are coming in on a cold streak while Southern Exposure is on a hot streak. But for me, I think Southern Exposure is going to win this one. I'm going to go out on a limb and say Southern Exposure wins this one. I'm not saying that just because of record, but I think Southern Exposure has the better players, and I think, me personally, they have come along a lot quicker than normal. Unfortunately for Southern Exposure, they did lose that first matchup to the Untouchables, but I can argue and say that was way back when the season first began, as this whole thing is, I think the Untouchables are a much better team than they were back in May, and I think they're much better than they were on May 30th. You look at the big time wins, winning in 5. I know winning in 5 sets kind of means that they kind of struggled with some of those teams, but to pull off 3 straight wins and eventually win your conference is quite something. So you kind of have to give Southern Exposure the exposure, and also you kind of gotta like Southern Exposure's story. I want to say Southern Exposure did not have a great season last year, and then they eventually paid the price for it. They did not have one of the better seasons. Like, they were kind of in the Dallas Tornadoes' shoes, where they were inexperienced, they were an expansion team, and then they eventually got their butts kicked by a lot of other teams that had players that were a lot more experienced and whatnot. So, all in all, I think the Untouchables season will sadly come to an end to Southern Exposure, but I think it should be a good battle. I don't think anyone's going to get swept. If anyone gets swept in this matchup, then boy howdy, I don't think that team was either at full strength or that team was fully trying. As we say hello to Pierre Moss in the chat room, thank you for joining me. He says, have a great show. I appreciate you. And hopefully you do listen in, because we have one of New Jersey's teams that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. As let's go to the second matchup, which unfortunately is not the New Jersey's team. It's actually between the Texas Tyrants and the Orange County Stunners. So this is a very fascinating matchup between the Stunners and the Tyrants. So the Tyrants tied for first place in the American Conference with the Las Vegas Ramblers. They have the best record. They're tied for the best record in all of the NVA. Unfortunately, they lost the tiebreaker to the Las Vegas Ramblers as they faced the Orange County Stunners, who started the season off 0-3, but that was because a plethora of injuries hit them. But then the Stunners won 5 of their last 6 as they finished 5-4, and they finished third in the National Conference. So, looking at the Tyrants, they have They have something going on really good, as the Tyrants are led by Gianluca Grasso, who I had the pleasure of watching back when he was in junior college, which was quite nice. So, as for the Tyrants, like I said, they won most of their games, and they beat Team Freedom. Sorry, Pierre. That's the New Jersey team. In their last matchup of the season, they also beat the Untouchables in straight sets, and then in the first matchup of event number 3, they defeated the Dallas Tornadoes, which... Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, that's not it. What was the first matchup between... They beat the Ontario Matadors. They beat them in 5 sets, though, so... But Texas has been hot as of late, and we're not just talking about the weather here. We're talking about their winning streak, as the Tyrants have won... Looks like they've won 6 straight ever since they went 1-3 in event number 1. Like, this Texas team has been really strong, and I think this team is probably the dark horse to win it all, because with how their team has come together ever since going 2-1, this team has looked very impressive. But they're facing an Orange County Stunners team who looks so much better than they did in the previous meeting. As when the two teams first met in the first meeting, the Tyrants actually won that first meeting in 4 sets. So, but however, that was way back in the month of April. So, and remember, the Orange County Stunners were not at full strength. They had a few of their players out, as now they're back at full strength, and they look like a lean, mean volleyball machine. So, it's tough for me to pick who's going to win this one. And I'm going to feel bad for which team loses, just because I know one of the players on Southern Exposure, as Nick Amato, our former set point guest, is on the Orange County Stunners as well. So I have to pick between one of our guests, who I've also witnessed play volleyball at Long Beach State and at Orange Coast College, or one of my buddies who played at Orange Coast College. It's a tough pick. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to pick the Stunners. I think this is going to be one of the upsets that's going to be happening. I think the Orange County Stunners can beat the Tyrants. Why? Because I think the Stunners have been playing great volleyball as of late, and the Tyrants have been as well. They've won 6 straight, but I just think that Orange County is a much better team than they were way back in the month of April. Like, you compare their gameplay to April, it's not comparable. It's like comparing apples to oranges, or gummy bears to chocolate-covered strawberries. So, it's not comparable. So, I think the Stunners squeak out with the win, but Texas is really darn good. Like, they say everything is bigger in Texas. The kills are probably bigger, the players are probably bigger and taller, and they're probably going to be fired up and ready to go, but I think Orange County is going to probably, pun intended, stun Texas. So that one's probably the matchup to watch for. And I'm definitely going to be seeing all these matchups on a live stream as opposed to like getting updates on them. So it wouldn't surprise me if Texas won, but I just think Orange County has the talent, and with them being at full strength as opposed to April, I think Orange County is going to do it. I'm not saying that just because I'm a California homer. I'm saying that because I think Orange County just has a little bit more in the tank than Texas does. But it's a battle of two hot teams, so you can't go wrong with that. So I have Southern Exposure and and the Stunners going to the semifinals. And then we go to match number 3. We have Team Freedom, the team from New Jersey, going up against Utah. So a quick plug right here. So Team Freedom is from New Jersey, and you can hear all about New Jersey's shows on The Show That Never Sleeps with Harrison Glazer and Pierre Moss every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific Time, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's a great show. It talks about all things New York and New Jersey sports, and hopefully they could squeak in a little shout-out to the Team Freedom. I kind of think their Team Freedom's name is a little awkward, considering it's not like the New Jersey Freedom or the Atlantic City Freedom, but Team Freedom's not bad. Well, but who am I to judge when it comes to team names? So anyway, moving on to Team Freedom versus the Utah Stingers. So the Stingers finished 6-3, and they actually had a good shot at winning the American Conference. Unfortunately, that was not the case. And by the way, I actually need to go over the format of this tournament. So it's actually going to be the first place team from the American Conference taking on the fourth place team from the National Conference, and the first place team from the National Conference taking on the fourth place team in the American Conference. And then for Texas versus Orange County, it's the second place team from the American Conference taking on the third place team from the National Conference. And then the second place team from the National Conference will be taking on the third place team from the American Conference. And then the fourth place team from the National Conference will be taking on the first place team from the American Conference. I hope I didn't go too fast. If anyone has any questions, just let me know. I kind of messed up the format. I thought it was going to be for the first place team from the American Conference takes on the fourth place team from the same conference and whatnot. I thought I was gonna go like the NBA does it with the East and West, the NHL does with the East and West, the NFL does with the AFC and the NFC, and the MLB does it with the American League and National League. You get the point. So this little format kind of threw me for a loop. So my apologies if I originally said something else in the past, but that's the past. So anyway, let's get over to the Utah Stingers versus the Team Freedom matchup. So Utah finished 6-3 in their conference, while Team Freedom finished 5-4. Like I said, Team Freedom really dropped the ball as they lost their last 3 games, which really cost them winning the National Conference. And the worst part is for Team Freedom, all of their losses came in 5 sets, one of which came against Southern Exposure, which really cost them. So it sucks for Team Freedom, but they're in this position because they just couldn't close out. But this is kind of a blessing in disguise somewhat, as the Stingers and Matadors, or not the Stingers and the Matadors, the Stingers and Team Freedom will be facing each other, as the last time these two teams faced, if I could look back on it, Team Freedom actually beat the Stingers in 5 sets on May 29th. So this is a very, very fascinating matchup right here, as Team Freedom that weekend also lost to the Matadors. So ever since their win against the Stingers, Team Freedom has lost 4 straight. Whereas the Stingers, on the other hand, they have kind of turned the corner as, other than they've won 3 of their last 4 games, with their only loss coming against Southern Exposure. But like I said, Southern Exposure has been the most determined and under-the-radar / hottest team as of late. So, I mean, not as hot as Texas, mind you, but I think that Utah is kind of back on track. And they did have a good chance at winning the American Conference. And this just goes to show you how deep the American Conference is. So as for the matchup between these two teams, I think Utah's going to get the job done. I think Team Freedom really had a bit of a setback, and I think that setback has kind of put them behind the 8 ball a lot, whereas Utah has been pretty battle-tested, and I personally think Utah, and they know from experience, they have experience on making it this far into the NVA playoffs and possibly having a deep playoff run. I feel Utah will take that next step and beat Team Freedom. It won't be easy, though, because knowing one of the most dangerous teams in the postseason is a team that's on a losing streak. Because I know Marcus said a loss is a loss, but before those 4 losses, those 4 straight losses, Team Freedom actually was 5-1, or no, not 5-1. I think they were 4-0 going in. I think it was 4-0. If they lost their last 4 straight, they were 5-0. 5-0. I'm not doing my math correct, unfortunately. So, Team Freedom actually hadn't lost a match up until they lost to the Matadors, which I think that was probably one of the more stunning losses. And that right there was kind of the loss that broke the camel's back, or the straw that broke the camel's back. Regardless, Team Freedom is now in a precarious situation, whereas the Stingers, they've been here before. They have been battle-tested. They have some pretty decent wins, if you ask me. Like, I know they just barely squeaked out a win against Chicago, but Chicago was fighting for its playoff lives as well. As looking back, the Stingers beat an Orange County team at somewhat full strength. I mean, mostly full strength for the most part. It was way more full strength than ever. And their only losses have been against Southern Exposure, Team Freedom, and the Las Vegas Ramblers. The Ramblers can be argued as one of the most complete teams in the NVA. But they did sweep the Texas Tyrants, but that was all the way back in April. And then they did, like I said, they did lose to the Ramblers, which they lost to them in 5 sets, so it's not like they got swept or anything. And then they lost to Team Freedom, which was undefeated at the time. So I personally think Utah is a much better team as of late. Again, I know they struggled against Chicago, and I know they lost to Southern Exposure, but Chicago, like I said, was fighting for its playoff lives. And then Southern Exposure was just the hotter team as of late, and they knew they needed to win in order to lock up the conference title, and they did so. So they know, and they also knew that they couldn't bank on tiebreaker to help them win. So all in all, I think Utah just kind of was at the wrong place at the wrong time with some of these losses. Like, all their losses have come in 5 sets, whereas the Untouchables win was in 5 sets, which is kind of funny when you look at it one way. So that's why I think Utah is going to win, because I don't think they're going to go 5, and as long as they don't go 5, they are in pretty good shape. But I could see Team Freedom just giving them a fight, so we'll see what happens in that matchup. So the last matchup I got to go over is the Las Vegas Ramblers against the host Ontario Matadors. So Las Vegas is theoretically the number 1 seed from the American Conference, as they will be taking on the number 4 team from the National Conference in the Ontario Matadors. So the Matadors just barely snuck into the playoffs. They only had 2 wins. They actually tied for 4th place with the Dallas Tornadoes. Fortunately for the Matadors, they surprisingly got into the postseason, as the Matadors just had a plethora of not-so-fun losses. Their only wins were against Team Freedom. I'm sorry, not Team Freedom. No, it was against Team Freedom. And looking back at this, because again, there is no set schedule here. So and the LA Blaze. So Matadors only beat the LA Blaze, which didn't even qualify for the playoffs, and they also beat Team Freedom, which eventually became the straw that kind of broke the camel's back. Other than that, they've had 7 losses. Some of those losses were competitive, but for the most part, the Matadors haven't been up to snuff. I still wonder to this day how Team Freedom lost to a 1-win Matadors team. And keep in mind, Team Freedom was undefeated, so it's kind of interesting to say the least. So, as for the Ramblers, the Ramblers have been quite the fascinating specimen, as the Ramblers were kind of in the same boat as the Matador, or as Team Freedom was, as they were undefeated throughout most of the season. Me personally, I think they're one of the most complete teams, and they showed it against their win against the Utah Stingers. But they did lose to a talented and fully healthy Orange County Stunners team, and that was only one of 2 losses. Their second loss, however, came against the worst team in the National Conference, being the Dallas Tornadoes, which was very shocking to say the least, as Dallas didn't even have 1 win going into this one, and the Ramblers just had all the momentum. So I kind of have to wonder what happened, and maybe Las Vegas kind of sat their starters. I don't know, but I don't think you sit starters when you're vying for playoff position. So, as for this little matchup between the Ramblers and the Matadors, I'm sorry to the Matadors, but the Ramblers are they're going to win this one. The Ramblers are actually the reigning NVA champions, and honestly, this is a team that really is one of the more complete teams. They have a great coaching staff. One of the coaches I actually know in Teran Rodriguez. No, he's not my brother, disclaimer. But this team does have they have a lot of very talented players, and they've only lost 2 matches all season, and they tied for having the best record in the whole NVA. So that's that's my opinion. So if Ontario wants to have any sort of chance of winning, they gotta play practically flawless volleyball. If they don't, then this one's going to be a slam dunk for Vegas. So that's my little thing when it comes to the Matadors and the Ramblers. So I have Southern Exposure, the Orange County Stunners, the Utah Stingers, and the Las Vegas Ramblers in the semifinals. So in the semifinals, if that actually comes true, it'll be Southern Exposure versus the Orange County Stunners. I have the Stunners making it all the way to the finals. If those two get out of the first round, which it could happen, the Stunners making it out might not be as likely, considering Texas has been hot of late, having won 6 in a row. But I personally think Orange County has been the better team as of late. As for the possible semifinal between the Stingers and the Ramblers, I got the Ramblers making it out of the semifinals and make it to the finals. It's going to be a grind, though, because both those teams are in the same conference, and honestly, it's going to be a fight to the finish. Like, if the first matchup between those two showed us one thing, it's that both of these teams are very, very, very good. So, and also, Utah was kind of one 5-set loss away from forcing a 3-way tie in the American Conference. That would have been crazy. But I got the Stingers falling to the Ramblers in the semifinals. And then I have the Southern Exposure beating the Utah Stingers in the third place match. Whereas for the championship match between the Orange County Stunners and the Las Vegas Ramblers, I have the Ramblers winning. I have the Ramblers taking home the entire thing. This is just my initial guess, and this is my initial pick. If my quarterfinal picks don't come true, I'll probably update everything, but I kind of think that's going to be happening right now. But anyone can win this whole thing. Even Ontario can, because they're the home team. We'll see what happens, though, but I am excited for the NVA playoffs. I'll try to keep an eye on this to the best of my ability. I promise you I will, and I'll probably give you all up-to-date, on-the-spot updates. So we'll see what happens. And it's going to be a fun time, and I'm really excited. I just got to find the link, and then we are golden, baby. And who knows, maybe I'll be commentating some matchups, but that's most likely doubtful. So that's your NVA talk right now. I cannot wait for the NVA playoffs to start. It all begins on Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time with Southern Exposure taking on the Chicago Untouchables. So we'll see who comes out on top in that matchup. So now we're going to jump over to some transfer news. Now, there's not too much transfer news, surprisingly. No one has entered the transfer portal as of late. So, unfortunately, we only have 5 transfers as of recent. So, the first transfer is Macy Gordon, who is transferring from Cal Poly to LMU to play beach volleyball. Gordon is a 5'8" beach player, and she's a graduate student. So, LMU just got a lot better, pretty much, as she goes from the Big West Conference champion to the West Coast Conference champion. So, quite the fascinating transfer right there. And hopefully she does make LMU better for the Lions' sake. For those that don't remember, LMU did finish third in the NCAA tournament behind UCLA and USC. So there's that right there. And then I'm gonna probably butcher this girl's name. Sinilawi Ulalave. Sinu Ali Ulalave is transferring to Toledo from Wichita State. Uluave is a 5'11" outside hitter and libero, as she's only a sophomore. That was very tough to pronounce. I apologize if I butchered that name, but Uluave is transferring from Wichita State to Toledo. So there's that right there. And then next up on the transfer roster list is Soleil Thomas, who is transferring from Clemson to Iowa State. So she goes from ACC all the way to Big 12, as she is a 5'11" junior outside opposite. So she's hopefully going to provide more depth for Iowa State. And then we have Jamie Cox transferring from the Big 10 over to the Pac-12, as Cox is transferring from Michigan State over to Arizona State. Cox is a 5'6" libero, and she's a graduate student. She played 4 years at Michigan State before, but now she's transferring to Tempe to play for Arizona State. So there's that. And then last but not least, we have Pani Napoleon, who is transferring from Hawaii to UCLA. She is a redshirt sophomore listed at 5'7". So she is going from the Big Island to the Sunshine State, which to me is California, or Hollywood. Whatever it is, she's transferring to UCLA. So she's going to the defending Pac-12 champions home site. So that's kind of big right there, and hopefully for their sake, she does make a big impact, as UCLA did finish second to USC in the NCAA tournament, which was heartbreaking for them, but it is what it is. So there's that right there for all the transfers. Only 5 transfers, which I'm a little surprised. I thought there was going to be a lot more than just 5. But I guess it must be a slow night, I guess. But c'est la vie, As we say hello to Mike Pat in the chat room, thank you for popping in. I appreciate you tuning in. Mike Pat hosts Let's Whine About Sports, as he had a great show yesterday with his wife Allie on the 4th of July. You can check out Let's Whine About Sports every Sunday night at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, as Mike talks about all of the finest wines in the world, as well as talking about sports. Before we jump into a commercial break, I do want to give a congratulations to the U.S. Women's Volleyball Sitting Team. Yes, the U.S. Women's Volleyball Sitting Team just recently won gold in the Golden Nations League in the Netherlands. So, very nice job for the U.S. as the U.S. continues to win gold when it comes to volleyball. Well, women's volleyball at the very least. Now, sitting volleyball is a lot unique. You don't stand, obviously. You sit, and then there are a lot of unique rules and regulations when it comes to sitting volleyball. But I don't want to bore you all. That's probably going to be for another day. The U.S. Women's Volleyball Sitting Team will be going to the Paralympic Games, as they will be going to the Tokyo 2020 Olympics, which is some good stuff. And hopefully they do bring home the gold, as that's very impressive that they were able to bring home gold in the Golden Nations League in Netherlands. So hopefully we will get to see them do their thing. Unfortunately, they don't have the matches listed as who they played and who they beat and who they beat in the championship. So that's an unfortunate thing right there. But that is my little shout out to the U.S. women's sitting volleyball team, as they won gold. So hopefully for their sake they do bring home some more gold from the Olympics. So there's that right there. So now we're going to take ourselves a quick little break. When we come back, we'll have more volleyball action, as we'll be talking about the beach volleyball pools for the Olympics coming up. And then we'll also talk about some Pac-12 scheduled releases, as we have scheduled releases from Stanford, USC, UCLA, and Oregon. Hopefully we can get to them all in a good amount of time, but we'll see. You're listening to Set Point here on IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports. We'll be right back after a word from these nice little drops right here.
Hey guys, it's Blake Henley, better known as H-Town Blake to some of you. Happy to announce that Bases Loaded is back and in full force. We'll be bringing that high heat every Tuesday night here on IE Sports Radio. So come home, get ready, dig into that batter's box, and see if you can chase that high heat, baby. So we'll be coming to you live with all the stats, all the rundowns, all the division rivalries, and every team that's going to make the playoff push to get to that one and only October and get to the pinnacle of what baseball is, to hoist that Commissioner's Trophy when it's all said and done.
What's good, fight fans? It's your boy, Marcus Los Great, here to give you what you want, here to give you what you need. Yeah, man. Yeah. I'm coming to you live, straight from your mama's basement, with a crispy, awesome white tea. We are coming to you live every Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. powered by IE Sports Radio, your direct feed for all that is sports.
And we are back with Set Point. Thank you all for tuning in once again on this beautiful Monday afternoon. You can check out all of our amazing shows here on IE Sports Radio. You can also check them out on many different platforms such as Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Podcast Addict, TuneIn. The list goes on and on. And you could also check out this show, Set Point, on many different streaming platforms as well. As, again, I did not ever know this fact about Set Point, but it's on many different streaming platforms such as Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Deezer, which I've never even heard of, but first time for everything, and then Podcast Addict. So I didn't even know Setpoint was a part of those 5 listening platforms. I'm actually quite proud. And one thing to note, and this is actually for the near future, well, not the near future, but still the future, which is in about 2 weeks, Setpoint is going to be celebrating its 100th episode, and I hopefully will have something planned and organized for that very, very special episode. I don't know if it'll be on Monday, I don't know if it'll be on Tuesday, I don't know if it'll be on Wednesday, I don't know if it'll be on Thursday, heck, it could even be on Sunday, but I'm really excited for episode 100, like, just to scratch the surface on it. I didn't think this show would ever make it to 100 episodes. I think this is one of the few shows that has made it to 50, or 100 episodes. Like, I did the 50th episode special, and it was pretty cool, so... Well, not pretty cool. It was amazing. So here's hoping the 100th episode special can maybe top that. So, but that's for another day. That's not for another 2 weeks and all that. So now let's get over to some U.S. Olympic news. Yes, we are in segment number 2 of Set Point. Let's go to some beach volleyball action as the beach Olympic pools have been announced. So unfortunately, all of the pools didn't get released, as only the U.S. the U.S. pools are released. Actually, no. Here's the full release. Here it is, y'all. As the beach volleyball Olympic tournament bracket has been released. So we'll go from. We'll start with the women first, because ladies first. I was going to start with the men, but I'm like, no. I'm a gentleman. I will definitely go ladies first. So, ladies first. So, in Pool A, we have Pavin and Melissa, Heidrich and Verge Dupree, Sood and... So, Pavin and Melissa are from Canada. Heidrich and Verge Dupree are from Sweden. Sood Borger is from Germany, and Stam Schuden is from the Netherlands. I wish they had their full names, but I can't complain. Oh well. So Pool B is Alex Kleinman and April Ross, which is the A team. Then we have Kaiser and Mepelink in the Netherlands. Then Liliana and Elsa from Spain, and then we have Zhu and Wang from China. Again, this was just released, when I first saw this was released less than 5 minutes before I went on for Set Point. I was like, oh gosh, I did not prepare for this one bit. So, I'll probably talk more about this next week, but these are the pools that have been released as of right now. So, I'm sorry if I didn't fully prepare on this, but again, this was just released with a little bit before my show went on, so I couldn't really prepare it properly. So, for Pool C, we have Agatha/Duda from Brazil, then Bansley and Brandy from Canada, then Wang, and Jia from China. Then we have Gallet and Pereira from Argentina. Then we have Pool D, which is Ana Patricia and Rebecca from Brazil, Kelly Clace and Sarah Sponsel from the U.S., Kravsinoka and Gradina from Latvia, I want to say, and then Makoka and Kadambi from it says Ken, which I presume it's not Kennedy. So regardless, that's Pool D right there, and Kenya. So according to country code, it's Kenya. So again, I apologize if this wasn't fully up to snuff. Again, I'll do a whole lot better on this next week. Again, this was released just before I went on with set point, so there's that. Then for Pool F, we have Ishii and Murakami from Japan, then Betshart and Huberli from Sweden, then Kozuch and Ludwig from Germany, and then rounding off Pool F is Hermanova and Slukova from the Czech Republic, the Czechoslovakian Republic. So that's all the pools for the women's side. And then the tournament will be held, the preliminaries will be from July 24th through July 31st. And then the elimination round will begin on August 1st through August 7th. And then the medal matches will be played on August 7th, or August 6th for the women's side. The men's side, the medal match will be played on August 7th. So there's that. Speaking of the men, here are the pools for the men. So Pool A consists of Mol A and Sorum C from Norway. Then Semenov and Leshukov from Rock? Ugh. Again, I really do apologize for all this. Taiwan. So Krasilino. So Semenov and Leshukov is from Taiwan. Then Herrera and Gavira is from Spain. And McHugh and Schumann is from Australia. Then Pool B consists of Krasilnikov and Stoyanovitsky from Taiwan. Then Perusik and Schweiner from the Czech Republic. And Plavins and Tox from, looks like that says Lat. I don't think it's not Latin. I don't think it's Latin. Let's just look it up. Latvia. So Latvia. So Plavins and Tox is from Latvia, and then Gayasholia and Rubio rounds off Pool B, and they're from Mexico. So Pool C consists of Sharif and Ahmad from Qatar, so that's Middle East. So Sharif and Ahmad are from Qatar. Gibb and Taylor Crabb are from the U.S. And then Karambula and Rossi are from Italy. And then Heydrich and Gerson are from Sweden. Then Pool D consists of Allison and Filho Alvaro from Brazil. Then Brower and Muse. This last name I'm probably going to butcher. I'm going to butcher a lot of these last names. Miusween from Netherlands. Then Lucina and Phil Dalhouser from the U.S. And then Azad and Capagrosso round off Pool D as they are from Argentina. Then Pool E consists of Fajahelik and Brill from Poland, Evandro and Bruno Schmidt from Brazil, the Grimalt brothers, whose first name is just E and M, are from, it says Shy. I want to say that's like, it's not Chicago. It's like Chile. So the Grimalt brothers are from Chile, and then El Graoui and Abika are from Mar, which I'll just look that up as we speak. Morocco. So Pool E's El Graoui and Abika are from Morocco. So that rounds off Pool E, and we go to Pool F. We have Gotsu and Shiratori from Japan, Thol and Wickler from Germany, Nikolai and Lupo from Italy, and then rounding off is Cantor and Losiak from Poland. So those are all the pools in terms of the men's and women's. I apologize if I really screwed up with most of these pools and I mispronounced everything. Again, I didn't have enough time to prepare for this. The US just released this, and it was just released for they just released their pools of who was representing for the US, where I just went to the full-on website, which had all the pools, but all the players abbreviated. So I had to make do with what I can do. Next week I'll get more in depth into this, as I'll also be making big note of the Americans, such as like Phil Dalhouser, who just recently retired. He was a living legend, and the AVP will miss him, but I wish him the best in this in the Olympics. And I also definitely got to make note of April Ross and Alex Kleinman, aka the A-Team. I'm surprised they're not the top overall seed, though. Like Pavin and Melissa from Canada are the number one team in the country. Alex Kleinman and April Ross did lose a match, as they were no longer the number one team in the nation, or the number one pair in the nation. But I'm pretty sure they're not going to let that one deter them going forward. So we'll see how it goes for them, though. So that's going to do it for all the US/Olympic beach volleyball talk. I'll talk more in more full depth about this next week. I'm sorry if I was a little unprepared for this, but this whole thing just came up way before Set Point went live. It came up 5 minutes before I went live, so there's that. So try not to be too mad at me, y'all. Alright, now let's go over some Pac-12 volleyball schedules. Let's go to the fun stuff, or the extremely fun stuff. So we've got some Pac-12 volleyball schedules released. Last week we did the schedule releases from Florida and from Penn State. Now let's do the Pac-12. So the first schedule that caught my eye was Stanford. So Stanford, as we all know, missed the NCAA tournament for the first time since 1980, I want to say. Regardless, it was the first time in quite some time that they missed the Pac-12, or not the Pac-12, the NCAA tournament, as they were unable to defend their crown. This season should provide a lot more promise, as they do return most of their team, except for Megan McClure. They return quite a good amount of players, such as Kendall Kipp and Holly Campbell. And then they return some other good players, such as Alina Oglivi. And then they return sophomore middle blocker Annabelle Smith and McKenna Vicini and Katie Baird, just as a few players to note. So, as for the schedule, Stanford opens up its schedule at Villanova. That's going to be on August 27th. And then the day after, Stanford will stay in Pennsylvania to take on Temple. So that's going to be on August 28th. So that's it. So that's that for their first little week. Then on August 31st, which is a Tuesday, Stanford will return home to play Florida, which Florida is made all the way to the Elite Eight before falling to top-seeded Wisconsin. So Florida is really going to be a tough one for Stanford, but we'll see how it goes. Then I forgot to mention, after Stanford plays Temple, the schedule picks up for them. I saw it in, like I said, they play Florida, which made all the way to the Elite Eight. Then on Sunday, September 5th, Stanford plays at Texas for a nice little showdown with the runners-up from last year's championship game. That's going to be a very fun matchup between Stanford and Texas. Texas returning most of their players and will most likely give Stanford a battle. And it's at Texas, so we'll see if Stanford can win on the road. So there's that. Then after their little bout with Texas, Stanford travels to Oregon for the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge. They'll have a few days off in between the Texas match, after the Texas match, and before the Pac-10 Big 12 Challenge, as Stanford takes on Minnesota on September 10th at 4 p.m. Pacific time. So they've already got the times allotted for that, and they've also got the times allotted for Florida and Texas. Stanford will take on Florida at 5 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesday, August 31st, and then Stanford will also play Texas at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Sunday, September 5th. As for the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge, like I said, Stanford plays Minnesota at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and this will be at the University of Oregon. And then on Saturday, Stanford plays Penn State on Saturday, September 11th at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Once again, it's also going to be at the University of Oregon, so that's something to note as well, as Minnesota and Penn State both made it to the Sweet 16. Unfortunately for Minnesota, they're kind of going to be good next year. I think they're obviously not going to have Reagan Pittman, but they should have some other good players worth noting. And then Penn State will be just as good, despite them losing a few players to transfers and whatnot. So both challenging matches for Stanford, but it's nothing the Cardinal can't overcome. Then after the Big Ten Pac-12 Challenge, Stanford returns home to face Nebraska on Tuesday, September 14th at 5 p.m. Pacific time. That's going to be a very fun matchup right there. And Nebraska-Stanford is always a heated matchup. Ever since the 5-set NCAA Women's Volleyball Championship in 2018. Yeah, 18. Because in 19, Stanford took on Wisconsin and then won that one. And then 2020, it was between Kentucky and whatchamacallit. As we say hello to Andrew Hagenbaugh, he says, "Good evening, Teran. Sorry I'm late. I'm at work." Hey, no problem. I know what it's like to be on the work grind. But thank you for tuning in, my man. So I'm just discussing some Stanford women's volleyball and some other Pac-12 schedule releases. So you're just in time, Andrew. So back to Stanford. So after Stanford's matchup with Nebraska, by the way, that I don't think I mentioned it, the Nebraska matchup between Stanford and Nebraska is going to be at Stanford, and it's going to start at 5 p.m. Pacific time. Then on Sunday, September 19th, Stanford travels down to Lexington, Kentucky to take on the reigning champion Kentucky, as that matchup's going to be at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That's going to be a very fun matchup. It's going to be the battle of the past two NCAA champions. Kentucky will have lost a few seniors to graduation and transfer, but I don't think it's anything that they can handle. It's going to be very tough for Stanford, though. So, can Stanford win against the reigning NCAA champion? We'll see. And then after the matchup against Kentucky, Stanford kicks off Pac-12 play on Wednesday at Cal. That is a 7 p.m. Pacific time. And again, it's at Cal Berkeley. Then on Sunday, Stanford returns home to Maples Pavilion to take on UCLA. That's a 2 p.m. Pacific start time. Then on Friday, October 1st, Stanford will have Arizona State at home. And then on Sunday, October 3rd, Stanford will take on Arizona in Maples Pavilion at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Then on Friday, Stanford hits the road for a 2-game road trip as Stanford plays at Oregon State on Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And then Stanford will remain in Oregon to take on the University of Oregon in Eugene. That is slated for 2 p.m. So Oregon has improved, and then UCLA is also good as well. The funny thing is for Stanford is that they're only playing UCLA once. I don't know why, but it must be like a regional thing. So we'll see. Then after Stanford's trip to Oregon, they return home to take on Utah and Colorado. The Utah matchup is slated for Friday, October 15th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Then the Colorado matchup is slated for Sunday, October 17th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Then Stanford travels to Washington to take on Washington State in Pullman. The Stanford-Washington State matchup will be on October 22nd at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Stanford will remain in Washington to take on the University of Washington in Seattle. The matchup will be on October 24th, but the time is to be determined. Then Stanford will still be on the road as they'll take on the Arizona schools. They'll take on the University of Arizona on Friday, October 29th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And then on Sunday, October 31st, they'll take on Arizona State with the time to be determined. Then, after a 4-game road trip, Stanford will have a 4-game homestand as Stanford will play Oregon on Thursday, November 4th at 7 p.m. And then on Sunday, Stanford will play Oregon State at Stanford on November 7th with the time to be determined. And then on Thursday, November 11th, Stanford plays Washington at Stanford with a time to be determined. And then on Sunday, November 14th, Stanford plays Washington State, and that's also a time to be determined. Then after the matchup against Washington State, Stanford has a 3-game road trip starting on Thursday, November 18th against Colorado. That's a time to be determined, followed by a trip to Salt Lake City to take on Utah. That's going to be on November 21st. That is also to be determined. And then on Wednesday, November 24th, Stanford travels back to California, but will travel to Los Angeles to play USC at the Galen Center. That is going to be slated for 4 p.m. And hopefully I'll be able to go to that one. I want to go. This is my goal for this year. I want to go to at least one USC women's volleyball match, but I'll get into that a little bit later. So finally, Stanford concludes its season at home against Cal. That's going to be on Friday, November 26th, the day after Thanksgiving, with the time to be determined. So that is Stanford's schedule in a nutshell. A semi-not-so-complicated nutshell right there, as I'm thinking Stanford can make the NCAA tournament again. I think last year was just a little bit of a blip on the radar, and it was just not their season, with it being a shortened season, and then they didn't get their season started until 3 weeks in the Pac-12 season, and everyone else had at least 1 or 2 matches under their belt. So Stanford just got off to a bad start, and they just couldn't recover. I don't think they'll ever have a season like that again. Like, they should have a much better season this year, so we'll see. So now that I mentioned USC also released their schedule in terms of women's volleyball, as USC opens up its season in the Trojan Invitational. So they kick off the season against an interesting opponent against Denver, as USC and Denver will face each other on Friday, August 27th at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Then on Saturday in the Trojan Invitational, USC will take on Campbell at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. And then later on the day, they'll take on Cal State Northridge at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. So that's who USC will be taking on to begin its season. Then USC travels down to Lexington, Kentucky for the Bluegrass Battle. I like that one. The Bluegrass Battle, if I reckon I say so myself. I am sorry to everyone that lives in Kentucky. I will never do that again. But USC travels down to Lexington, Kentucky to take on Northern Iowa at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. So that's 10:30 a.m. Eastern time. So if you're a dedicated USC fan, I'd suggest setting your alarm clock for like 6:30, getting a cup of coffee or a 5-hour energy, and just tuning in for USC women's volleyball's matchup against Northern Iowa. Later that day, USC will be taking on Creighton on September 3rd at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. That Creighton matchup is a very interesting matchup, considering Creighton did make the NCAA tournament. They only advanced to I think they only got to the round of 32, if I'm not mistaken. If not, I think they lost in the first round. Regardless, that Creighton matchup is very fascinating, as Creighton is one of those under-the-radar teams that don't get a lot of love, as I think that Creighton matchup could go either way. That's going to be the first challenging matchup for USC. And depending on who USC has, depends on if they can grind that one out. As Creighton did lose in the first round of the NCAA tournament. They lost to Morehead State, which won its first ever NCAA game, so there's that. Then on Saturday, USC takes on the reigning NCAA champion in Kentucky, at Kentucky, mind you. That's going to be on September 4th, on a Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. That matchup is really going to be difficult. Like, Kentucky is going to be very good despite all the players they'll be losing, such as Madison Lilly and Avery Skinner. So I don't even know if Madison Lilly is going to be... I'm pretty sure she's not taking her 5th year of eligibility, because I did hear that Lilly did sign a professional contract to play professionally. I don't know where she's playing, but she is going to be doing bigger and better things, and unfortunately she will not be returning to Kentucky for that possible 5th year. And I don't think she could return to Kentucky just because she's played... Well, no, she can't play 5 years at Kentucky. I mean, Dana Rettke is playing her 5th year at Wisconsin, but I'm getting off track for a moment. Anyway, so after USC partakes in the Bluegrass Battle, USC will hit the road to Hawaii this time, as they'll be taking on the University of Hawaii. As we all know, Hawaii never got a chance to have its season last year because the Big West Conference was on something. I'm not going to go full into detail. I digress on that. So USC takes on Hawaii. This will be a 2-game series, mind you. That's going to be very fun. So I don't know how good Hawaii is. I don't know if they'll have all their players back, but USC will play Hawaii on September 10th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So just a fair warning to all you USC fans in California. USC is going to be playing Hawaii in Hawaiian time. So I'd suggest getting a cup of coffee and a 5-hour energy and hoping the match doesn't go 5 sets. So USC will also take on Hawaii again on Saturday, September 11th at 10 p.m. Pacific time. That'll be 7 p.m. Hawaii time. So for those wondering what's the time going to be at in Hawaii, that is a 7 p.m. Hawaii time start. Whereas in California, it's a 10 p.m. Pacific time start, which is unfortunate for us. C'est la vie. But after the Hawaii matchups, USC will return home to California in its humble abode at Galen Center to take on the University of San Diego. That matchup is slated for Friday, September 17th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. So, if you all know, San Diego actually beat USC the last time these two teams met in 5 sets. This matchup is definitely going to be something. It's the Battle of California between San Diego and Los Angeles. It's really going to be a fun matchup, so I can't wait for it. But then after USC plays San Diego, they have a 4-game road trip as USC heads 20 minutes to Pauley Pavilion to take on UCLA. That's a 7 p.m. Pacific start time, and it's going to be on Wednesday, September 22nd. Later that week, USC takes on Cal. They'll head up north to take on Cal Berkeley. That matchup is slated for 2 p.m. Pacific time. It's on Sunday, September 26th. Then after their matchup against Cal, USC will head up to Washington for the Washington series. The Trojans will take on Washington State at 7 p.m. Pacific time, as USC will take on the Cougars in Pullman. And then on Sunday, USC will take on UW, aka Washington, in Seattle at 1 p.m. Pacific time. That's going to be slated for October 3rd on Sunday. And then after that 4-game road trip, USC will return home to take on the Rocky Mountain Challenge, as USC will take on Utah on Friday, October 8th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And then on Sunday, USC will take on Colorado on October 10th, which is a Sunday, at 1 p.m. Pacific time as well. So after that Rocky Mountain Challenge at Galen Center, USC will hit the road to Arizona to take on Arizona State. That matchup is slated for Friday, October 15th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And then USC will head down to Tucson to take on Arizona on Sunday, October 17th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And then after the Arizona series, USC returns home for a 4-game homestand starting on Friday, October 22nd against Oregon State. That is slated for 7 p.m. Pacific time, while USC remains home to take on Oregon on Sunday, October 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Then on October 29th, USC takes on Washington at Galen Center. That one's actually slated for 8 p.m. Pacific time, which I kind of find rather strange. I don't know why they'd make that an 8 p.m. Pacific start time. It's probably the matchup I'm not going to go to, but oh well, maybe Washington has something going on. I'm not sure. But still, that is weird that it's an 8 p.m. Pacific start time. Then on October 31st, which is a Sunday, USC will be taking on Washington State. That matchup is to be determined on what time it'll start at. The same can be said for the matchup at Colorado, as USC plays Colorado at Colorado on November 5th, which is a Friday. Then on Sunday, USC travels to Salt Lake City to take on Utah on November 7th, which is a Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Then USC heads down to Oregon for the Oregon matchup. USC plays Oregon on Friday, November 12th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. And then USC heads down to Corvallis to take on Oregon State. That matchup is slated for 12 p.m. Pacific time. And once again, that's going to be on Sunday, November 14th. But that is the last away matchup for USC, as USC will return home to Galen Center for the last 4 games of its season, or its regular season, as USC will take on Arizona on Friday, November 19th. Time is to be determined. Sunday, November 21st, USC will play Arizona State at Galen Center. That's going to be a time to be determined. And then on Wednesday, November 24th, USC will play Stanford at Galen Center. That matchup is slated for 4 p.m. And then last but not least, USC will be taking on UCLA at the Galen Center on Friday, November 26th. Time is to be determined, and that is going to do it for USC women's volleyball schedule. I think this year USC is going to come back strong just because they had such a great tradition, and unfortunately their first matchup of the season just was canceled because Stanford unfortunately had to enter COVID protocols, and the Pac-12 did not do USC or any other Pac-12 team any favors, as USC just couldn't schedule that Week 1 matchup. They had to go directly into Week 2 at Oregon State, with Oregon State having a match under its belt. And eventually, USC lost that one out of 2 matchups against Oregon State. I should really say they split the matchups, just because saying lost is kind of a harsh word, but I digress. Anyway, so let's jump over to UCLA's women's volleyball schedule release, as UCLA opens its season off on August 29th against UC Davis. Kind of an interesting first game, if you ask me. So that matchup is slated for 2 p.m. Pacific time, and it's at UC Davis. Then on September 2nd, which is a Thursday, UCLA will be participating in the Long Beach State Tournament. I don't think it's called that, but I think it's called like the ASICS something Invitational or the Nike something Invitational. We'll just call it the Long Beach State Tournament. Regardless, I digress. But UCLA travels to Long Beach State to take on Long Beach State. That matchup is slated for September 2nd at 7 p.m. on a Thursday, so there's that. Then on Friday, UCLA will be playing Portland State at Long Beach State. That's going to be slated for 5 p.m. for a 5 p.m. start time. And then on Saturday, UCLA is going to be taking on Georgia Tech in Long Beach. That matchup time is slated for 3 p.m. Pacific time, and that's going to be on September 4th. The Portland State matchup is going to be on Friday, September 3rd, while the Georgia Tech matchup is going to be on Saturday. That Georgia Tech matchup is really fun, and the same can be said for that Long Beach State matchup. Like, Long Beach State versus UCLA in almost anything is really intense and fun. So, I really hope I can go to that. Unfortunately, I don't have an all-access pass like I did when I worked with the school newspaper, but we'll see what happens. Then UCLA travels to San Diego for the San Diego Invitational. They'll travel to University of San Diego to play in the San Diego Invitational. So UCLA plays at University of San Diego on Friday, September 10th. That time is slated for 7 p.m. Pacific time. And then the day after, September 11th, which is a Saturday, UCLA will be playing San Diego State at the University of San Diego. That is also a 7 p.m. start time. Then, before the Pac-12 opener, UCLA has one more final tune-up as UCLA takes on Butler at Butler in Indianapolis in the Hinkle Fieldhouse, as UCLA plays Butler on September 17th, which is a Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Then UCLA takes on the University of Milwaukee on Saturday, September 18th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Also going to be in Hinkle Fieldhouse, which is basically the University of Butler. I guess the Milwaukee matchup should be more entertaining. Not that I don't think Butler's going to give UCLA a good challenge, but I just think UCLA, with the return of Mac May, the return of the Mac, how funny, is going to be one force to deal with. So, there's that. Then UCLA starts its Pac-12 campaign off by facing USC on September 22nd, which is a Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Then they travel to Palo Alto to take on Stanford on Sunday, September 26th at 2 p.m. Pacific time. UCLA then travels to Seattle to take on, or Washington to take on, Washington to take on Washington on October 1st, which is a Friday, at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Then UCLA takes on Washington State on Sunday, October 3rd. Time is to be determined. UCLA then returns for a 2-game homestand against Colorado. That matchup is going to be on Friday, October 8th at 8 p.m. Pacific time. Then UCLA takes on Utah at Pauley Pavilion at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Sunday, October 10th. Then UCLA travels to Arizona to take on the Arizona schools. Friday, October 15th at 8 p.m. Pacific time. UCLA plays at Arizona. Then Sunday, October 17th at 1 p.m. Pacific time, UCLA travels to Arizona State to take on Arizona State. Then UCLA will come back home to a 4-game homestand as UCLA plays Oregon at Pauley Pavilion at 7 p.m. Pacific time on Friday, October 22nd. Then we'll play Oregon State on Sunday, October 24th at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Then on Friday, October 29th, UCLA will play Washington State at 7 p.m. Pacific time in Pauley Pavilion. And then UCLA closes its 4-game homestand against Washington at 4 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday, October 31st. So there's that matchup. Then UCLA has a 4-game road trip as UCLA plays at Utah on Friday, November 5th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Then on Sunday, November 7th, UCLA plays Colorado in Boulder at 11 a.m. Pacific time. Then UCLA heads down to Oregon for the Oregon matchup. They'll first travel to Corvallis to take on Oregon State on Friday, November 12th. Time to be determined. And then UCLA has another primetime matchup against Oregon. That's going to be on Sunday, November 14th in Eugene. Time is to be determined. Then UCLA will return home for a 3-game homestand, starting with Arizona State on Friday, November 19th. Time is to be determined. The last 3 games of UCLA's schedule is time to be determined. On Sunday, November 21st, UCLA plays Arizona at Pauley Pavilion. And then in UCLA's last home regular season game, the Bruins will take on Cal on Wednesday, November 24th. And then to close out the regular season, UCLA will play at USC in their crosstown rivalry. That's going to be on Friday, November 26th. Time is to be determined, but again, it'll be at Galen Center. So there's that right there for UCLA's schedule. To me, I think UCLA has a very promising schedule, and with the return of Mac May and most of their team, I think this UCLA team is not going to be worth underestimating. And I was a little disappointed that they couldn't make that they didn't make it to the Sweet 16. They lost in kind of embarrassing fashion to BYU, but BYU is good, I'll admit that, but I think UCLA could have done so much better. It was so disappointing how they lost, so there's that right there. But we'll jump over to Oregon's schedule, the Oregon women's volleyball schedule, and then I shall send you all on your way as Oregon kicks off its season against Portland State. This is actually their Oregon Invitational. They play Portland State on Friday, August 27th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. And then later that day, at 6 p.m. Pacific time, Oregon takes on Santa Clara, which should be a fun matchup. I think Santa Clara will have a lot more time to prepare for its season. And I think with the return of most of their players, I think Santa Clara should be in better shape. Then on Saturday at 1 p.m. Pacific time on August 28th, Oregon plays San Jose State, which will end their little 2-game, I wouldn't say 2-game homestand, but it'll end their little mini tournament. So their invitational, as it basically ends the Oregon's little invitational, as they'll play San Jose State on Saturday, August 28th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. Then after Oregon's invitational, they play Rice on September 2nd on Thursday in Houston, Texas. I don't know if that's going to be in the same place, but I know Rice and SMU are both in the same conference. But that Rice matchup is going to be fun for Oregon, as Oregon takes on Rice with a time to be determined, mind you. It's going to be on Thursday, September 2nd, and then Oregon plays SMU the day after on Friday, September 3rd. It's going to be in Houston, Texas, so there's that. Then Oregon kicks off the Pac-12 Big Ten Challenge against Penn State at home on Friday, September 10th at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Then the day after, Saturday, September 11th at 7 p.m. Pacific time, Oregon plays Minnesota. So after that little homestand, Oregon will travel to Washington, D.C. to take on Howard on Thursday, September 16th at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Then they'll travel to Harvard to take on... They'll travel to Harvard to take on... No, they won't travel to anywhere. They'll play Harvard on Friday, September 17th at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And then later that day, they'll play American University on that same Friday the 17th at 4 p.m. Pacific time. Then after that, Oregon's going to jump right into Pac-12 play, as Oregon will kick off its Pac-12 campaign against Oregon State at home. That will be slated for a 7 p.m. Pacific time start. It looks like every Pac-12 team is going to be playing its rival on its opening night. So Oregon takes on its rival Oregon State that night. Then Oregon heads down. Oregon will be heading down for a 3-game road trip starting on Sunday, September 26th at noon Pacific time, as Oregon will take on Arizona State. Then Oregon will be playing Colorado on Friday, October 1st at 6 p.m. Pacific time in Boulder. And then Oregon will take on Utah on Sunday, October 3rd at 11 a.m. Pacific time. So after that little 3-game road trip, Oregon will return home for a 4-game homestand starting on Friday, October 8th against Cal at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Then on Sunday, October 10th, Oregon will take on Stanford at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Oregon will take on Cal, by the way, at 7 p.m. Pacific time on Friday, October 8th. Then on Thursday, October 14th, Oregon will take on Washington at 7 p.m. Pacific time, which is going to be a fun little rivalry. One of the most underrated rivalries, in my opinion. Then on Sunday, October 17th at noon Pacific time, Oregon will take on Washington State for that little Pac-12 matchup. Then after that, Oregon has a 2-game road trip down to beautiful Los Angeles as Oregon takes on UCLA on Friday, October 22nd at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Then on Sunday, October 24th at 1 p.m. Pacific time, Oregon will take on USC. And then after that matchup with the Trojans, Oregon heads back home to take on the Rocky Mountain Schools. Starting on Friday, October 29th, Oregon takes on Utah at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Then on Sunday, October 31st, Oregon takes on California. Time is to be determined, but it is going to be in beautiful Eugene, Oregon. Then on Thursday, November 4th, Oregon plays Stanford at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Then on Sunday, November 7th, Oregon plays Cal in Berkeley with the time to be determined. Then on Friday, November 12th, Oregon returns back to its humble abode to take on USC, aka Matthew Knight Arena. That matchup will be slated for 7 p.m. Pacific time against USC. Then on Sunday, November 12th, Sunday, November 12th, Oregon will take on UCLA in Eugene with the time to be determined. So we don't know what time that's going to be at. Then after their 2-game homestand, Oregon will hit the road to Washington starting on Thursday, November 18th to take on Washington State. Time is to be determined. And then on Sunday, November 21st, Oregon takes on Washington with the time to be determined in Seattle, Washington. Then Oregon returns for a 1-game homestand as Oregon will take on Arizona in what most likely will be their senior night game, in my opinion, as Oregon will take on Arizona Wednesday, November 24th, with the time to be determined. Then on Friday, November 26th, Oregon will take on Oregon State in Corvallis. That is a time to be determined, so that is that for all of the Pac-12 women's volleyball schedules released as of right now. I'll get into the others as they get released as well, like Washington, Washington State, Utah. If they haven't been released already, then I'll probably get to them next week. So, just goes to show you that volleyball season is actually getting closer and closer. There's only about less than 2 months until the NCAA women's volleyball season begins. And funny thing is, we actually just had NCAA women's volleyball end just recently. So, the grind never stops when it comes to the NCAA women's volleyball season, or NCAA volleyball season in general, as I'm going to need to figure out what time and day I'm going to be starting Set Point Season 3. So that's something to keep an eye on as well. And who knows, maybe I'll do StreamYard that day, but I digress. But on that note, that is going to be it for today's episode of Set Point, and that's going to be it for all the schedule releases for this week. But once again, that is it for Set Point for this week. Thank you all for tuning in. If If you're listening on the live stream, I appreciate you. If you're listening on the replay, I appreciate you. And without any further delay, it is that time, ladies and gentlemen, is that time to drop the beat. Because I'm about to dip like a banana in chocolate. You feel me? Thank you all once again for tuning into Set Point. I really appreciate you, whether you're listening in the wee hours of the nighttime, the wee hours of the morning, or anywhere. I'm glad you're listening. I really appreciate you, no matter what streaming platform you're listening on, whether you're listening on the replay or you're listening on the live stream. I really, really appreciate you. Thank you to those in the chat room, such as Adam Parnick, Marcus Loves Great, Pierre Moss, Mike Pat, and Andrew Hagenbaugh for tuning in, even if it's for like a little bit. I really appreciate you. For everyone here at IE Sports Radio, this is Teran Rodriguez signing off. Have yourselves a great rest of the week. I hope you all had a great 4th of July. Continue to do great things this week. Don't be stupid. If you haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you're going to the beach, wear plenty of sunscreen. Wear plenty of sunscreen in general. And I will see you on Thursday for the 1-year anniversary of the SoCal Supreme Sports Show. Peace!